welcome along to this week's edition of the Huddle Breakdown, where it's just the two amigos as Laura is out gallivanting across Europe on a vacation or a holiday, I think as you folk call it over there. So as always, joined by my friend Alan Morrison, Celtic by Numbers. And we are here today to review the Motherwell game. I think we're going to chat a little bit about what's going on at the club off the pitch. And then we're going to do a little whip around. I don't know, there's some news breaking. There's breaking news and player and manager of the month from Hearts and this title challenge that Celtic have to be worried about. So, Alan, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. I mean, the soap opera that is Scottish football trundles on. I mean, we spent the summer setting up the fact that the changes that were happening in the league and around ownership were generally a good thing in terms of if you want to increase the profile and the quality of the league, but also, recognizing the risks and challenges to Celtic in that. And it's just gone off in all sorts of unpredictable ways, which is, naive on my part because at the end of the day, it's Scottish football and I should be fully expecting it to whirl about in a very unpredictable way, which it certainly is.
Yeah, that's right. So I think by the time this goes to print and gets released to the public, Derek McInnes will be the Rangers' new manager. Brendan Rodgers will replace Ange Postecoglou at Nottingham Forest.
Okay.
And what else will happen? I mean, let's just get some more drama going. But anyway, I'd say that tongue in cheek. Let's start with the Motherwell game, which was a delightful. I mean, again, thanks again to Greg Marshall, who joined us last week to preview the game. A Motherwell supporter and analyst who's worked in the industry, isn't presently, but has worked in football before. He basically laid the groundwork, and it played out very similar to what he laid out was likely to happen. And it made for a pretty entertaining. I suspect any neutrals that somehow caught the game would have enjoyed it quite a bit. So, Alan, what were your kind of high level thoughts on the game from a performance perspective?
Yeah, just that. But also, and at the outset to say credit to Motherwell, not in a sort of patronising way. Haha, we won the game. You tried to play football type thing. Absolutely not. They were they were really good, and they were you had to admire how they set out with their game plan. It was effective. I mean, they probably deserved a point. I mean, I know the XG numbers were racked up by Celtic. There's a couple of penalties in there for either side that boost that, but they may well feel that they deserved something out of that game, and that's fair enough based on the way that they played. They made it entertaining for sure. And these dull games that we've been complaining about, you got to be careful what you wish for. A team rocks up and has a right go, and it gets all a bit tricky, doesn't it? So yeah, very very entertaining. Lots of interesting tactical nuances. I can't remember the last time a team in Scotland tried to play that way. Maybe Falkirk last year in the League Cup to some
That's
extent.
right. Good shout. Yeah.
Um, and they almost pulled it off, but for but for that pesky Maida and others, which we'll get to.
Yeah, a late winner with a diving header. Those, could be less entertaining than that. So yeah, maybe let's start with the first half then, because I looked at your stat pack that you put out on huddlebreakdown.com. Is it fair to say? I mean, really, for the first hour, this was kind of a toe-to-toe type of match, even with the underlying data. I mean, there was not one team really dominating the other one at all.
Well, yeah. Yes, no. I think they did get themselves into a tangle playing out from the back on a few occasions. There was quite a lot of turnovers, quite a lot of defensive third losses on their part, and Celtic obviously profited from that eventually in a big way. But it kind of looked likely if they kept going down that road because remember they've not really played this way until the start of the season. They played a number of lower league clubs in the League Cup, which is probably quite useful in terms of getting warmed up for the league season. In the league season, they've not really kind of got what they deserve. I'm talking sort of XG terms here, in terms of they've only won one game, and lots of draws. So it's not, it's they've had lots of plaudits in terms of being good to look at, good on the eye. They've been effective as well in terms of underlying performance, but it hasn't sort of translated onto the scoreboard as yet. And the being 3-0 up at Tynecastle and only drawing another sort of quite could be considered a quite harrowing experience for them. But fair play that they came to Celtic Park, and I did wonder if they would kind of dial down that a little bit and be a bit pragmatic, but they really didn't at all. And they were very brave, which we'll come to when we sort of get into some of the detail. They were very brave with their pressing as well, and very, very wise with it. It wasn't like just all out, just going to chase them all around the pitch sort of stuff. It was very selective and very effective. And do you know what? They've got some really good players, by the way. The one I was disappointed at, and I did enjoy your chat with Greg, and apologies I couldn't make it. I was looking forward to seeing Elliot Watt, but he was a bit quiet in all honesty in the game. But his pal beside him, I think he's German, Fadinger.
Friday, I think he's Austrian. Yeah,
Austrian. Sorry,
yeah.
he was very good indeed, both in terms of breaking play up, but also his passing and his energy about the field. He was excellent. The guy on the right wing, Maswanise, is lively.
Handful.
He set up both the goals, and his genuine speed. The left backs, I love the left back Longolo. I mean, he's like a gazelle, powering down that left side there. I mean, he's one that Celtic should keep an eye on. I'm not sure technically whether he's all that, but in terms of athleticism, pace, I think he's already got 4 goals for the season. He's set up a few, and you can see why, because he didn't get beyond the midfield. He gets beyond the striker. The guy, the Australian striker Stamatolopoulos, he took his goals well. His diving header, I thought, was excellent. The cross and the goal. So I've picked out 4 or 5 players there that I thought were really, really good. What perhaps is my worry for them, accepting its early days, is they didn't seem to be able to bring equivalent quality off the bench, and that might be one of their problems going forward, especially in the forward area. The guy they brought on up front, Song, I think it was
brutal.
wasn't a patch on Stamatolopoulos, who's not very big, but he's one of these. He looks like he can finish, and he gets about the pitch, and he presses well, and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, again, I don't want to be patronising, but it's refreshing, right, to see a Scottish team at the higher level play something other than skyball, and also do it effectively in a short period of time. So, I think you've got to give them a lot of credit for that. I do wish them well with that style of play.
Well, I thought, I joke, but it's like my body. If I excluded beer and pizza, I'd look like peak Brad Pitt, right? So if you exclude the horrible passes that their keeper made, which were, there were some doozies in there, but his range of passing, like, it was actually really
He was
incredible.
awesome. Yeah.
I mean, he was pinging some balls around there, like, wow.
Made some good saves, by the way, as well.
He did. Yeah. So, obviously you have to include the beer and pizza. So that's why I'm a mess. But passing the ball directly to Nygren for a goal is kind of wipes out most of the good stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it was refreshing in that regard. But I've been saying this since really the start of the season when they started playing this way. I worry how this will age as the season moves on and their depth gets challenged a little bit and teams begin to adjust to how they're playing. And the fact that they haven't been able to bank points during this period when they've been playing well in the nicer weather, I fear for them a little bit because they haven't really created much distance or really any distance between them and that relegation fight zone. So I'm rooting for them. I mean, I am not only because Greg's a good guy and nice enough to come on our dopey show, but the fact that they're kind of like St. Johnson, you kind of pull for people that are trying to do something a little bit different. So let's talk about then how Celtic handled their pressure. What did you think of our build up, kind of our tactical setup? Was there anything different? Was this just are we in the 4-3-3 horseshoe of death doom loop here that just was shaped a little bit different because we had a team that actually came front footed a little bit and pressed us high, or did you see anything different that Celtic did?
Can I just to finish on Motherwell and pressing and what they provided in terms of a challenge to Celtic? Let me just explain that a little bit more, and then I'll come back to perhaps we dealt with it. So just looking after the game about what was it about their performance that could be an outlier, because it felt like it was in terms of was it the keeper play, was it their passing, was it even some negatives, like the number of times they were giving it didn't work and they lost the ball in the final third. Because to be fair to them, they've not played a team that presses as well as Celtic, and as much as we criticise the team, the one thing that is functioning this season is the pressing and the counter pressing. In fact, it's arguably improved, and that's probably what's saving us, if I'm honest, at the moment. But if I just put up the first kind of graphic there, so these are the two outliers, if you like, in terms of matches. So the first one is the top three, going from the bottom one being the highest value of regains by opponents from pressing activities. So this is where a pressure's been applied and the opposition have actually won the ball back or forced a throw in or a corner or something like that, or some kind of turnover. According to Opta, this is. And the most that any team has ever done in the time that I've got records for is actually was from this game, Motherwell, 56 regains. And the other two next highest occasions were that absolutely abject performance under Ange at Ibrox at the very end of the 2023 season, which was just
The post split
they were
mailing
going,
it in.
yeah, they were, yeah, exactly. We were mailing it in, played a sort of bit of a weird team. They were desperate to sort of win some pride, and Mickey B was you're probably clinging on at that point a little bit. So we kind of got, that was a terrible, horrible display. And then good old Derek McInnes, a match against Kilmarnock away from home, which we won comfortably, but they gave us a lot of trouble in terms of their ability to press us and turn the ball over. And then the second one is the percentage of regains relative to the amount of pressing that you're doing. So the volume of pressing that the manager Jens Bertholascu, Danish guy, um, it wasn't insane. It was over 200, which is high, but it's not like Craig Levine levels of, right, we're just going to run around a lot until we all die on our feet and then get hammered. It was kind of sensible volumes. So based on 56 regains, was 27% of all the pressures that they applied during the game. And that's the third highest that we've come across in the league. All this is in the league. This isn't Europe. Very different story in Europe, but this is all in league play, going back probably, I think it's about 5 or 6 years. I've got records for this. The most was actually again against the Derek McInnes team. Which makes you think, if Derek McInnes, you know, if he gets this Hearts team pressing in time as effectively as he likes to, that they could post some good numbers on that. If he did go over to Ibrox and had even, well, I'm going to say better players, but I'm not sure that's right. He could cause a bit of mayhem there. The second one was Stephen Gerrard's side in 2021, which obviously was again not a happy not a happy Celtic side. And then we come to this game at the weekend. So even though as a viewer you would have been, I suspect, quite impressed with their playing out from the back, the role of the goalkeeper, some of their individual forward play, some of the combinations through midfield. It was actually their pressing that was the most impressive, which you've got to allow for the context that they're very early into their time playing this style of play. We all know pressing takes a long time to perfect, or to improve, should I say. You never perfect it. It's always going to be a risky strategy. And Celtic are improving year on year under Rodgers, but it's taken 3 years for Celtic to get to the level they're at now. This guy's putting up these impressive numbers against arguably the best team in the country, within 7 or 8 matches. So that, I think that's worthy of note, really, and credit to the manager and the players for taking that on board.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, just for viewers' perspective, I mean, we've talked about how kind of a normal run rate for Celtic, and Celtic are, and I 100% agree with you. That's probably one of the aspects of coaching and strategy that Rodgers is still world class in, is pressing and counter pressing. Like that's what his milieu is. And our kind of efficiency rate is baseline's around 20%. So that puts into perspective the fact, you just don't get up into that 30, 35% in any kind of sustainable way. So the fact that they've been able to do that against us, given the disparity in resources and all that, I mean, really, really impressive. So did circle back then, was there any tweaks? I mean, we clearly had some issues with our press then. Did you notice anything different that we tried to do? Or, I mean, I didn't find selection particularly good to be facing this man-to-man high pressing situation from a Celtic perspective, but kind of how did you see what Celtic tried to do in that phase of play and kind of combating this aggressive front-footed Motherwell press?
Yeah, I mean, it was familiar problems. I think, Tanecki has become the outball, which is a risk of being predictable. I think he had a decent first half. Again, a lot of progressive runs again. He's going to be posting insane numbers, probably leading numbers in two stats that I'm going to set up for you. One is progressive runs, and the other is touches in the box, right? So these are all IQ indicators of someone who's getting into good positions. Right. You then marry that up to XG and expected assists, and I think we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
You get into these great positions, but you don't deliver. And I'm sorry if that sounds a bit miserable. I'm just signposting it now because it will be coming to a Huddle Breakdown podcast near you, or an article very, very soon, I suspect. And I think he got taken off because, frankly, it's probably not surprising. He's probably a little bit fatigued. It's been a bit of a whirlwind introduction for him. European matches, 2 games a week, being suddenly thrust as being the guy to break down defences. So that we didn't get a huge amount of joy there. Maeda, I mean, it's a shame Laura isn't here. I don't know if she was at the game, but I wanted to ask her is that coming through my TV when I was watching it was that Maeda was getting quite nasty reactions from the crowds when he was, because he in the first half he seemed to do one of two things. He would try and go forward, and it looked like he was trying to juggle, like analogy I like to use, the, the baby elephant on the windy beach trying to juggle a beach ball. Or he would get the ball, he would sort of stand there, and then he would pass it backwards, and that seemed to be the only two things that kind of happened. I know he did try and put in a few crosses, and they kind of went to the stands, and he seemed to be getting really bad reactions from the crowd, which is surprising given what he's done for the club. And it might just be again a factor of the underlying levels of frustration around the place. I hope I'm wrong on that. I might have misread that. It might have been more of a general frustration at the way Celtic were playing, but it did seem to be very much when Maeda did something that wasn't particularly, effective. And people in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong on that, because I don't want to misrepresent that. Because it did take me back a little bit. So there wasn't a lot happening there. With the new midfield, McCowan and Hatate. Actually, at halftime, I thought Hatate had been our most effective player. I was kind of surprised he got taken off after 59 minutes because I think hitherto he'd been the one that had actually got the ball moving, got the ball forward. He was playing nice little diagonals. I think he enjoyed playing with Sarachi, who, as I say, makes these runs at interesting angles and gets into good positions. Whereas McCowan was having one of those days where nothing was really happening for him. So, and then McGregor actually grew into the game because again, I think they started off looking like they were going to man mark the three midfielders. And there were times when I watched and I thought they were being tracked, but then they kind of didn't in the end. And so
Right.
McGregor kind of got more and more on the ball, I suppose. But yeah, I did see anything new from Celtic in that sense. I think the Srirachi being, as giving that sort of thrust, if you want to call it that, the running from deep, getting into interesting positions in the field, running at interesting angles, not just up and down, overlapping or up and down underlapping, but actually coming in at angles. I think that adds an interesting dynamic to the game. I think he got spooked when he gave the penalty away and he got taken off shortly afterwards, and he was a bit untidy in some of his play compared to what we've seen. I think that's fair to say. And Tierney did settle things down a bit, I think, when he came on. He was a bit more steady. And I know you've got something on him later. So this was one of the hardest sort of boy of the match things. If you'd asked me at half time, I would have said Hatate. If you'd asked me before we got the equaliser, I would have said Liam Scales. And the reason I'd have said Liam Scales was because I felt he really stepped up in terms of he really started to ping the ball forward with intent, and he seemed to be, wanting to get on the ball and wanting to take responsibility, and I really liked that. At the end of the game, I looked at all his numbers, and they weren't particularly impressive, and he does a couple of characteristic kind of giveaways as well. But I wanted to get a shout out to him because I think he's maybe we don't give him enough praise this season. He's been one of the consistent players this season that's been really steady despite all of the other sort of soap operas that are going along. But so we'll come to maybe the subs in a bit, James. See what we thought of them. But I couldn't honestly say that we had anything that was different or interesting based on the starting players. It was more a case of at what point would them playing out from the back be punished by our pressing, and it took a long time.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of grade these things on a curve to a degree. So normally, if you were to say kind of a fit, full firing Celtic were to confront a Motherwell that played the way that they did, that you'd expect us to win 5 or 6-0 and to just shred them apart, particularly in the first half when we're fresh and when they get front footed and just the space that affords. Because one would expect that if we're kind of a fully firing, like an Ange ball Celtic level where you got Hatate, McGregor, Moy, Matt O'Reilly, like those kind of players in midfield, Jota, like they would just shred a team like Motherwell up if they tried to deploy this kind of tactic. So the fact that it was kind of nip and tuck through 60 minutes, I think speaks to the fact that there are still these kind of lingering issues. As I, like it's been my tongue-in-cheek characterization this year is kryptonite. I moved on from the Bruges model from last season to call it the kryptonite of this season. I agree. They were more, they were still a man zonal hybrid, but at times they were more zonally, and it depended in transition. But yeah, we hurt them some in transition, but not as much as one would think, particularly in that first hour. And then, yeah, I'd agree with them. And they really fatigued, it looked like. And then as they had to sub in some of those guys, I mean, that guy came in as striker. I mean, he might as well have been the guy who never comes off for Hearts that plays striker, walking around not doing anything on the press. I mean, it was he just didn't score any goals. So he was a real waste of space. But so yeah, it all just kind of fell apart for him in that last kind of 15, 20 minutes to a degree. And when I'm saying like pitch control and, tilt and all these fancy words.
Yeah. We weren't creating loads of chances. I mean, it was noticeable to me as well. We're going to take a bit of time to adapt to Iheanacho because there was a few balls that came across low and hard across the Motherwell box that you sort of think had Kyogo been on there, he's like his eyes would light up at some of these. Iheanacho isn't that striker, but if you want to play some intricate passes on the edge of the box and slip people in, he's your guy, right?
Yeah.
So that I think we're going to have to adapt a little bit in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the encouraging parts is we're starting to get some of those kind of cut back crosses again, which seem to have been kind of disappeared for a while. Those kind of high value, high quality crosses that have returned. So, but to your point, who's going to get onto the end of them? We'll have to wait and see on that. Well, let's get into some of the individual performances then. You mentioned your boy of the match. I love this one because I've sensed, and again, this is all understandable. Like we all want young players to do well. I think it was a notable absence, not only from a selection perspective, but not even in the squad, I don't think, in young Donovan. Think he had kind of a rough game against Braga, understandably.
He did.
And so this isn't why you selected your boy of the match, but I think
No, it was a surprise. Yeah, it was.
the Bricky's been taking some bricks in the last week. I think unfairly. I don't think he's been particularly bad, and I agree. Like I thought he was pretty good on the weekend. And again, he's playing against Motherwell. We have to keep that into perspective. But I think he gets a lot of arrows because people are like, "Where's Donovan?" Like I said, I get it, but I think that's also kind of unfair to Ralston.
Yeah, I don't think Donovan having a difficult time against Braga is something we should be worried about. He's 18, 19, whatever he is, and this is just normal development for a young player. It's going to oscillate, hopefully on a long-term upward curve, but there's going to be peaks and troughs, and that was very much a difficult game for him. But he never wavered from his self in terms of he's always trying to go forward, always trying to be positive. But when it doesn't come off, and you're playing against a team of that standard, it can be some downsides to that. I don't know if he picked up an injury. I'm surprised he wasn't even in the squad. But yeah, Ralston came in, and I know that people really blame him for the opening goal, but I think he got a pass fired at him in the centre of the pitch, which he didn't control. And then they worked the ball down the right from Aswanisi to cross to score. So accept all that. It was honestly a bugger's choice as far as picking the boy of the match. As I say, if Hatate had been on longer than 59 minutes based on the first half, I would have picked him, but he went off early. I would have picked Scales for the bit in the middle of the second half where he seemed to sort of step up and take responsibility. Actually, the player that had the best attacking stats by far was Maeda, mainly because he played the whole game, and you got to allow for the fact he played three separate positions, and then he
Right.
scores the last minute winner. So he would have been a great shout, but I mean, in the first half he was so hopeless, he just almost defied
Yeah, really bad.
believability. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I settled on Ralston. I mean, what is eye catching, and as I say, I'm a firm believer that the packing package of metrics, which, as I say, it's not an individual number. It may well get reduced to that, but within it is a host of um, information in this more sort of nebulous sense around leaning towards helping to explain different attributes and how comfortable different players are in demonstrating those attributes. It's as dense, it's as dense as it is thick, sort of thing. To have a packing score that was 62 more than the next highest player is noteworthy. Even in a single game basis, um, and things like other signals in terms of more about moments really than overall performance is the one about the element of packing where how many defenders are you taking out of the game. So for the fullback to take 8 defenders out of the game with forward passes is another noteworthy piece of data there. So, and it was his pack passing score 108 that was the bulk of it. So I think in a team that's sitting in a sort of mid-zonal block, which is what the opposition were, I think to be the one that's most effective at getting the ball through the lines, I think is why really he's deserving of that boy of the match accolade. But people will howl at that and question it, and that's fine. Other opinions are very welcome and absolutely as relevant. But that's my justification. If you want to put up some others, then please pile in. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those games where there's uh, reasonable disagreements across the board. I don't think that anyone had a clean shirt, so to speak. There were elements of the game that people were good and bad. Well, let's progress on to our probably our favorite controversial player of the season so far, in Benjamin Nygren, who obviously had a big goal, a gifted goal at that, but he was once again in a good place. You make your own luck, as they say, and that's something you've been talking about a lot, which is he seems anyway to have that Abada quality of being smart enough to be in the right place at the right time quite a bit. So yeah, I looked at it. I mentioned this before we went live. I looked at his day, and again, it's still early, but the amount that he's getting on the end of chances, I mean, he's legit in a like second striker level. Um,
Yeah.
in which for a team that's badly in need of goal scoring and chance creation, we could do worse than having an attacking midfielder that's posting like plus 0.4 type of XG numbers, which most teams, again, the world-class striker at Hearts is posting less than half of that and just got player of the month. So, for a midfielder, I guess at Celtic, it's different, but to be posting, just to put that into perspective, I mean, he's, I think, not quite, he's about 40% higher than what Matt O'Reilly's XG per game was back in his great, like the season that led to his Brighton move. So he's really doing a good job in getting in the box and having quality chances.
Yeah, that's it. That if you want to say that's his super strength, it's a good super strength to have. It is, and as much as I've mentioned before, his work rate and his getting about the pitch, if you want to call it that. Yes, he's not always the strongest in duels, etc. And no, his passing can sometimes not be the cleanest, in all cases. But in terms of doing a job for the team as a all-round midfielder in a 4-3-3, as his season heat map there shows, he certainly gets about the pitch. But the sort of pleasing red blob is the one right in the middle of the penalty area, around about the penalty spot. And if you look at his shots from this game on the right hand side there, as well as the goal, he had three other shots, three shots from that central area, right in the middle of the penalty area, and one from outside the box, but almost within the width of the posts. If you look at his season shot map, it's brilliant, because nearly all his shots, like 80% of his shots, are in that zone between the posts and in the penalty area. And you're going to score a good amount of goals if you keep getting into those areas. And this does seem to be his super strength. And as I say, it's a handy one to have, I think. Overall, he's well over 900 minutes now. His expected his scoring contribution, so that's goals plus assists per 90 minutes in all games and all competitions, is 0.77, which for essentially a midfielder is exceptional. And his expected scoring contributions, that's expected goals plus expected assists, is 0.73. So he's more or less bang on performing at his expected levels. So, I'll keep banging on about this because he keeps drawing criticism. I think he came on and
For
got into
goal
great
celebrations
positions.
too now, apparently.
Well, and if you and that's slightly. I mean, this is just people. I think some people are just looking for excuses to moan, given that, and this is what happens when there's general displeasure at how the club's performing, and I completely understand that. But if you look at him for his previous clubs, that's just how he celebrates
Yeah, I
goals.
know. I said totally tongue in
He,
cheek.
he,
Totally.
he always he, he always does that. I did love it though. I did love it when he scored the equaliser. I think Iheanacho was brilliant, saying, "Screw
Let's
that
go.
celebration.
Get your ass
Get
back
the
here.
ball. Get back to the centre circle, and we go again." That's exactly the attitude you need at Celtic. So that was quite funny.
Well, and I want to be clear. I am not suggesting that he's as good or even as close, anywhere close to being as good as Matt O'Reilly.
Yeah,
I'm strictly referencing that number to suggest that he's useful and performing a very important aspect of something that the team needs at the moment. So, and that has not been the case broadly across the pitch in multiple positions. So that's really my broader point. And again, I think he's another person that, and I'm going to segue into a couple of screenshots I have, because I think another player that has, I don't know about unfairly, because he hasn't played that well, but that I think there's been kind of early first impression that's negative on is Balikwisha. And when I went through Balikwisha in my benchmarking exercise, which I first did, I think last summer when he was first rumored, and then updated over this winter, and then once again, finally, as we signed him, or was rumored to could be signing again this summer, revisited once again. So I've gone through like 3 iterations of looking at his data in the past. And I've always thought, in going through that exercise, that he's a what I call robust player. I mean, he doesn't have any gaping weaknesses in the sense of like, oh my God, you're worried that, like we just mentioned with Tonetki. Tonetki's kryptonite might be decision making. An actual like end product doing something, like when you get into those dangerous areas, okay, what are you going to do about it? And I think Balikwisha, if put it in the proper role and utilized to kind of amplify his strengths, he doesn't have a lot of gaping weaknesses. So he should be again, like Nygren, not a world beater, but as part of a well-constructed squad. These are the type of players that we need to supplement the superstars, so to speak. So this was his first appearance. These are against Rangers. This is his pass received map. So it's each pass that he received against Rangers. And you can see, the X's mean it didn't work out too well, right? Self-explanatory. Blue just means, and in this game, most likely those are just passes back to somebody else. Those nice lateral and backwards passes that he was being understandably criticized about in that game. But you also see, that we talked about him in the past, and when I went through the benchmarking exercise, the discussion was, well, he's probably a number 10, maybe an inverted forward, kind of like in the Scott Sinclair, like in that half space around the penalty box area, or maybe an attacking 8 against lower level competition, that type of thing. So probably wouldn't want him playing attacking 8 in Europe against Champions League level, that type of thing. So that's kind of what his skill set seemed to align. Playing deep in build up as a wide winger was never in his kind of profile, even before he had his kind of severe soft tissue muscle injuries at Antwerp. So this was also Tierney's map. So again, this was an issue against Rangers. We know we can go back to that game. We were kind of bogged down in midfield. There wasn't a lot of final third creativity going on with either team. So that's not a game condition, and that's not a role that Balakwisha was put into that was going to kind of profile what he's good at. Well, if we go forward, and again, I granted it was only 20 minutes, but he did end up having he did something positive, which I think was, nice to see. It's like, well, why did he do it? Why was there something positive, and where was he on the pitch? Well, he was right in that area that I just described that would be ideal for him, positionally in a role. He was mostly in that half space, mostly where a number 10 would be. Nominally here, he was more of an inverted forward, like I said, more like that Scott Sinclair. And oh, by the way, this was Tierney. You can see the overlapping fullback wide that we've talked about all summer with the Tierney butterfly effect, and the potential for that being the game plan, maybe to have forwards more inverted and with the overlapping fullbacks. So Tierney's kind of been stuck in this purgatory, I would argue, as far as like, is he playing that more Lustig role deep as the third center back in build up and in attack, or how much is he actually going to get forward? There's all these questions about fitness. So I think in this relatively small snippet in time, and there's huge questions about how much he's going to be able to do this, I thought it worked okay, or at least pretty well, and that it suited Balakwisha to be playing that role with Tierney, playing the role that Tierney had. Now, it was also against a tiring Motherwell. It was also, Motherwell playing in a pretty open style, that type of thing. So, but I just want to reference this about the alignment of, skill set with role and kind of the tactical backdrop. Because I think, you put certain players in roles and systems that don't make sense or incoherent. You're maybe the manager at Hearts and or Rangers that just got sacked. So let's hope that Balakwisha gets put into these positions a little more, where he can be productive. Because I thought that was a great cross. It was a great finish, great cross. He has that ability around the box to be a very productive player, I think, and he's pretty decent at counter pressing, and like he's got a lot of that toolkit to fill that role. He's just not a wide attacking touchline winger who's going to beat guys 1v1. And the fact that people are moaning that he's not going to do that, well, expecting him to do that is literally insane. That's not, you might as well put me out there and ask me to do that. It ain't going to happen. That's not what he's good at. So I just wanted to touch upon that. Well, let's put a pin in that. Let's progress. Any other thoughts then to kind of summarize on the Motherwell game before we move on?
No, I'm gonna I'm due a piece from this week, and it's probably going to be along the lines of just taking a step back and looking at, where are we less effective than last season? Because I've got in my mind the Marcelo Bielsa, or the quote attributed to him along the lines of, well, if you're not scoring enough goals, start looking at your defense. Where's it going wrong, sort of thing, I guess, is it's probably something deeper than just your strikers aren't putting the ball in the net. It's probably your build up, etc. So I'm going to have an attempt at that. So just an FYI.
Okay, that'll be interesting. And defense and midfield. That's where I keep harping. So it continues to be my lament. But no, look forward to that. And let's transition in real quick. We're not going to spend too much time because a lot of people are talking about this, which is kind of the off the pitch developments with the collective, the fan collective, and the meeting with the leadership at the club. There was kind of dueling statements that have been put out before the minutes. You and I discussed when kind of the height of the unity after the 400 some odd fan organizations and fan media, and that kind of created this collective broadly. It was kind of the height of unity. And now I think we're getting more into the slog of that this is going to be a long-term issue. So just wanted to get your thoughts, if you have any, and where you think we're at in this process.
Yeah, so I think there was a bit of social media bits put around, people giving their thoughts on the meeting, in advance of the actual minutes. So as I say, there's a bit of statementing on both sides to sort of get ahead of that a little bit, which is probably not to be expected when you've got that many people in a room, frankly. I think, again, let's just reiterate that collective effort, that coming together of so many parts of the Celtic support is hugely positive and admirable. You're never going to please everybody. Obviously, there's always going to be different viewpoints, but they've got a steering committee, and so they're moving forward on that basis, and more power to them. I think whatever direction this takes, and whatever your views are on how this can be effective in terms of actually generating change at Celtic, I think there's always a role for fan activity. And obviously, it hopefully goes without saying, you don't want to go down the route that is the sort of default setting at Ibrox, where it's essentially it's the feral mob that look to dictate what is going on. And I'm not suggesting that Celtic fans would go down that road. I'm sure that they wouldn't. But any collective action from Celtic fans is always going to be picked up by the media, and therefore that is very useful in terms of keeping media focus on the underlying issues. And I think Celtic fans are far more organised these days, far more well connected. Not only have they got their own channels and their own means of communication, they're also connected to various journalists or people that maybe have been journalists. Therefore, to get a message out about, this isn't entitlement, these are genuine underlying concerns about good governance at the club, about performance over a long period of time, all those things are absolutely valid. We've got more ways and means of getting those messages out as a support, and in supporting each other and providing consistency of what these messages are. So I think that's all really, really positive. But I think as well, just need to be cognizant of what are the objectives here, what is it that is trying to be achieved, and some realism around that. There isn't one. As much as we're critical of the way that Celtic is run, and as much as we're very concerned about the influence of minority shareholders and the impact that has on operational decisions, day-to-day operational decisions, even, and those are valid concerns. This is probably going to be fairly complex. There's going to be one big, one bogey person to be shot at. There's going to be a multitude of different answers and different issues to kind of resolve through. But what I think is clear is that, probably demanding people be sacked and then hoping to sit down with them and expecting them to say, "You're right." I'm just going to hand in my jotters. I'm being facile about that. The reality is, the cold reality is, whether, and I don't like it, and I'm sure you don't like it, but it's the world we find ourselves in, is that in all likelihood, those that control the power holders at Celtic Park, let's say that, are probably reasonably satisfied with the way that the club is run. Now, that doesn't doesn't say it's perfect, and it doesn't say that the rest of us have concerns. I'm just outlining the way I suspect they see it, because they see money in the bank, they see the bottom line, they see, trophies being won. They see, last season at least, progress in the Champions League. They see all these things. They see, performance in, the Adidas deal, for example, and they think, well, as a management team, you guys are doing an okay job. That's fine. Now we look at it from a different perspective, but to expect the leading shareholders to turn around and just fire everybody and burn it all down and start again is just not going to happen, right? And I'm sorry, I don't. Much as we all might want that, even though I think it's probably not a great way to do business, it isn't going to happen. And I don't want to be negative about that. So I'm just trying to frame this in terms of realism, I suppose,
Right.
and cold reality of as I say, the world that we find ourselves in, not the way we want it to be. We have to deal with that world. So that's not to say that people should just throw their hands up in the air and not do anything. As I say, I think the collective is a great initiative. I think it's as long as it holds together, I think it could be a really positive vehicle. I think there's always a place for fan activism as long as it's positive. I suspect there will come a point where it might be a little bit tricky in terms of what people regard as the right next action, and I'm thinking here versus things which may harm the team versus things that are perceived not to, things which withdraw financial support from the club, which versus things that don't. I think there'll be a tension always around what activities to undertake based on different people's opinions of which road to go down. I suppose my view is that the way that the club is run and the attitudes of those who again hold the power will be, if you withdraw financial support and you don't buy tickets to cup matches, they'll cut the budget. If you don't buy Adidas merchandising and they get less commercial income, they'll cut the budget. What will happen is that whatever happens, the preferential shareholders will get their dividends. That will never not happen. The club will make a profit, or at least get very close to break even. The club will operate within UEFA financial sustainability rules. All those things will happen, even if you withdraw financial support. And what it will damage is the manager, the team on the pitch, and ultimately us as supporters. Many people will disagree with that. That's absolutely fine. We can have a good faith discussion about that, and I'm perfectly accepting a different opinion on that one. But I think that's where there might be a little bit of tension going forward. But it shouldn't. Ultimately, there's one of three things I think are the only way forward. So as I see it, one is that over a very long period of time, minority shareholder activism becomes powerful enough that the club is forced into change because of the interests of groups of supporters that have got behind a coordinated, shareholder-driven effort to have more influence on the board. I think that's possible. I don't know if it can happen. It may happen. It would take a long time to happen, and it's boring and it's not sexy and all that sort of stuff. That's option number one. Option number two is that we have another Fergus, another man with a plan or woman with a plan comes along who has the will, the means, and the ability to effect change. Is that likely? I've got no insight on that. But that scenario is a possibility because it happened once before. And then the third option is that the major shareholders currently sell out to probably an American investment firm that might consider that a club like Celtic that is good value even at say 200 to 300 million. Because as we've talked about, James, the cost of buying sports franchises in America is billions. Yeah, so buying a well-regarded, large European football club for 200 to 300 million may be seen by some people as being a good way forward. That is filled with risks, as we're seeing, and uncertainty and all that. So that's how I see the way forward now. But none of those things is to take away from the value and the benefit of having this collectivism, this collective by the fans, because I think we always need to have what are the objectives, what is we're trying to achieve, what are the concerns, what are the issues in the public domain, and efforts which keep it in the media attention, and therefore there's always a place for that, married to efforts by shareholders, etc., in the background to try and change the power balances and so forth. But that's I'm not claiming great foresight on this. Other opinions, I'm sure, are equally as valid.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add is I think that one of the notable aspects that seem to have come out of recounting, and again, we'll see what the minutes are, but they might be out by the time people see this, is the admission from the executive team that the non-executive board is approving spending at certain levels, which again is not all that surprising. I think the question that should be raised is at what level and what kind of like best practice is that if it's not at a reason. This is about running a modern organization as you have a budget and professionals in charge of it and domain experts running it. And that's pretty clearly not what's happening. So yeah. I think that's a fertile area to zone it for my 2 cents, again, whatever it's worth, because they've now said that on the record in front of people, whether it's at the AGM, but explore that fact and amplify a light on it and basically, for lack of a better word, embarrass people for running this like a Mickey Mouse operation. Like that's just absolute nonsense that a company this big, let alone a football club, would have non-executive directors authorizing the budget on paper clips. I'm using
it's ridiculous. It's not their role at all.
It's just insane. But anyway, well, let's move on, because we mentioned that we were going to talk about the happenings around the league, because it's big news, and it impacts Celtic indirectly, and then eventually potentially directly. I wrote a piece on Monday about kind of delving into, I meant this tongue in cheek a little bit. Is it time to panic about this title challenge from Tony Bloom? I mean, Derek McGinnis. I mean, Hearts. Or what does it actually look like from a performance perspective? Because I think kind of the normal recency bias analog to use is Aberdeen from last season, and that clearly worked out to be a train wreck for Aberdeen relative to the league performance. For the rest of the campaign. So let's start there, and then we'll leave the fireworks at Ibrox for last. So I'm just going to throw up this visual that I included in the column, which looks at non-penalty XG differential so far this season. And I adjusted this, so this is not rote for Celtics. Celtics is actually a good bit, not a good bit, but over 1. And Alan and I talk about 1 being kind of the Maginot line for variance on a game-to-game basis. And if you scale that up to a season, as we saw from the 2020-2021 season, where the net non-penalty XG difference was 0.89 for Celtic, I threw in this is before, I put this together before the Gerrard rumors became acute again with Rangers, but this was the Gerrard managed Rangers team of 18-19, when they had, I think, about 60% of the wage bill budget of Celtic. So still, not really seriously financially competing with Celtic. They had 0.9 in their XG differential, and that kind of calibrates to a mid-70s. The reason why I'm getting into that is that calibrates kind of a mid-70s range point total over a 38-game league campaign. So this is how I kind of conceptualize these. Okay, what's the underlying performance rate, knowing that there's variance around it? There's all kinds of weird clustering patterns of assistance, in the history where, one team gets 57 red cards against the other opposition and penalties, and then no one else gets that. And that did just magically cluster in that 2021 season for Rangers. But so there is those kind of strange variances that can occur. But generally speaking, all other things being equal, if you're kind of above 1, you're probably looking at in that kind of 80 to 85, maybe pushing 90, depending on how far above 1 you get in point total. I've put Celtic at 0.71 so far this season. And the reason why I have it below is that we're at an unsustainable low XG that we're conceding from open play so far this season. This goes back to what Alan said as far as how effective our counter pressing and pressing's been, but it's almost nothing. Like it's half of what peak Ange ball was conceding per game. So I've kind of adjusted that to say that normalizes.
Sorry, James. Sorry to butt in. Just one thing I'd add to that. I did a piece on Celtic Way, and the reason I'm raising it is because I had graphic shots against basically graphics, which I can't share with you. They're on Huddle Stats one, but essentially these maps can often be a little bit much of a muchness, and the interesting stuff is in the subtlety. There's nothing subtle about this. If you look at the shots conceded by Celtic this season in league play, they're all like outside the box,
pot shots,
ridiculous angles. They're all terrible, right? If you look at the shots Celtic have conceded from set pieces,
it's
horrifying. They're all in the centre of the penalty area, a bit like Nygren's shooting, but set pieces.
Right.
So I just wanted to. I thought it might be relevant to what you're saying.
Well, it does. So if you look at the graphic that I have up again for people listening, one of the columns is XG from set play differential or difference, and Celtics is badly negative right now. So the reason why I laid it out all like this is that the way that Celtic have been performing so far this season is kind of in the neighborhood of that 2020, 2021 Celtic side. Also that 18-19 Rangers side. So that is not a good thing. Like that's, so I'm not celebrating that by any means. So that's why I question this. Is it time to panic? In attack, yeah. In attack, yeah. There's definitely issues in attack and chance creation, particularly from set pieces. So I think we need to improve from open play. We really need to improve from set pieces. And if we do that, then I think the probabilities of winning the league are quite high, actually. The reason why I wanted to go over this again is context of Hearts is they are massively overperforming. So they have that in common with the Aberdeen side. Now, the underlying, if you see the non-penalty XG difference, is substantially better than what Aberdeen were doing last season through their first 11 games. So that, again, credit to Hearts. They're doing that. They're right on the upper edge of what the best third place teams have posted, or even a little better than that over the last, let's say, decade. So they are firmly performing at that level, but that's not a level that's likely to push 80, 85 points or even 90 points. It's more in that kind of 70, maybe mid 70s range on a full season point basis. So, they've been, and their out over performances on the goal scoring side. They've scored almost double the amount of goals versus the XG that they've created. And, I say it tongue in cheek a lot with Shankland. I've also said, Shankland can be a world-class finisher at times. That is his superpower. We talk about Nygren's maybe getting in the box. Shankland can go on these heaters where he finishes like he did for almost an entire season. I think was in 23-24. But that can be volatile. And when he cools off, then you're left with just a guy who takes a bunch of bad shots. And he doesn't press much. And, so I think that Hearts, if they continue to perform at this level, it's very unlikely. And again, you can't know for sure. Celtic would really have to take even another level down, and kind of variance would have to tilt heavily towards Hearts for that over a 38 game season for it to be likely. That, so it's not impossible, of course, but it's not time to panic. Absolutely not. But I do think if Hearts get some of their act in order, I think they have the talent to actually close this gap. I think that they're being badly mismanaged right now by Derek McInnes. His selections are kind of wacky. His tactics are kind of wacky. And he just has so many good players right now that when he brings these Jamestown guys on, they're pulling out all these games out of the hat for him, because they do have some terrific players that they've signed. And so that I just wanted to kind of go over that. And I thought that would segue into the visual that you prepared, which is your kind of expected points graphic, because the expected points are kind of derived off of XG. So it's not shocking based off of what I just showed that Celtic would also be leading this because Hearts have been overperforming relative to their underlying XG. But again, this is not to discount what they're doing. They are playing well. They are doing very well. It's just, is it well enough to really push on for a title challenge over a full 38 games? So that's my bloviating on that topic. Alan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. It's ironic that is a hill potentially that McInnes, because you criticise McInnes a lot, right? My view is that he isn't actually an idiot, and he is a reasonably competent football manager. And I think this is a Hearts team that with a lot of new players and a new manager that isn't yet sort of fully flowing, if you like, or we know that these pressing strategies take a long time to bed in, etc. And therefore, I'm minded to think in simple terms that they will improve as the season goes on, especially as they've got quite a big squad as well. They're pretty stacked now with players, so I don't think they'll, as the winter months come in, not only do they not have European football,
Yeah.
therefore they're not going to have the fixture congestion. They've got a reasonably big squad, so they'll be able to,
And quality depth.
they'll absorb injuries and not
Yep.
reduce the quality too much. So I think they will improve. Now, whether it will come down to, this literal hill, hills are pretty big and they don't move. That is Lawrence Shankland. Whether that is the hill that he dies on in terms of this season, I don't know. It's kind of funny at the moment when you see them struggling like they were against Hibs, and the only forward that doesn't get rotated off is the one that's done nothing throughout the whole
amazing.
game. But so it could be that's the hill that he dies on. I don't know, but I'm a bit more cautious about this than maybe you are in terms of. I think McInnes will, and the team will grow into it, and they will improve as the season's gone on. But if you look at this league table, which is, as I say, expected points based on underlying XG driving the probabilities of the number of points that you would normally have expected to have won, and as I said before, it tends to have the effect, looking at it that way, of reducing the margins inwards. So the top teams, especially if they've won all their games, will have less points than they actually have, because hey, as long as there's one shot against every game, that's not 3 points that you're expected to win, right? And so many of the teams at the bottom. So very worrying, starting from the bottom, very worrying days for Dundee, I would say, and getting battered at Aberdeen, who hadn't scored a single goal, is also worrying. I think Falkirk should be slightly concerned. They've played well in games, but they're just not. Again, they're not getting the rewards and turning that into wins. I think St Mirren, perhaps we're a bit surprised to see them down there. Livingston have actually played a lot more football than we think, so I think credit to them for that. I think they've been pretty impressive in some of their games, just from a footballing perspective. Kettlewell has got Kilmarnock firing. I think they only lost one game, and that was to us. And they're not good to watch, and it's all pretty dour stuff, but it's effective in terms of keeping them towards that top six rather than bottom six. Dundee United, I think, are probably a bit disappointing so far, given the outlay they have put into their squad. I don't think we're seeing that yet in terms of certainly underlying performances or points. Aberdeen mid-table, so that this is where if you've got sensible owners, do you sort of say, right, okay, yes, we're bottom, but actually, based on this type of performance analysis, we're kind of performing as a mid-table team. Now, neither of those things should be acceptable if you're the Aberdeen owners, given the investment that's gone on there, but you might not want to pull the trigger quite yet, I would suggest. Motherwell are new darlings, not getting the results that their performances have probably deserved, and even the plucky Rangers are really should be further up the league. But again, probably what I should do with this, but I'm not going to, because I've got too many other things to do. This is including penalties. So they
Right.
like Celtic, they've had a couple of key penalties in games which kind of inflate this number a little bit. But again, their performances are not that of a bottom 2 or 3 side, really, and therefore, in all seriousness, if they get a competent new manager, which we'll come on to, we do need to be cognizant of the fact that they're going to improve in all likelihood, and therefore, and get further up the league. And maybe Celtic are a little bit further ahead on this basis than people might have expected on that. So I think that's encouraging. My view on that is that whereas James is right, but what he focused on there was the goal scoring and absolutely focusing on this XG differential, wanting to get it not to 1, but actually to more like 1.5 would be your target, which means it really needs to double. um, our defensive performance and specifically our out of possession play around pressing and counter pressing, I think, is what stops this being a true 2021 an analog. It's because we're clearly not as effective in the attacking third, but I think we're still competent as far as those aspects of play. And so unless Hearts improve a lot, and then the Rangers have got a long way to come back. We should still be confident of winning the league, but we do need to improve in the final third for sure. Would be my current assessment. But I'm going to dig into that a little bit more over the next 2 weeks as far as written work's concerned.
Yeah, and I want to clarify. I'm not drawing the direct analog with 2021 because I agree with you. The issues in that season were as much about conceding chances as they were from creating. So I suspect, just because of there's just certain variability to opposition teams creating from open play. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's just not sustainable that we'll continue to suppress at this level. But that's why I'm not panicking. I also agree that Hearts will get better. It's just that they've been so kind of from open play. I think they really have to. And in my column, and I'll just bring up this graphic again. Their differential from open play is only positive 0.14, which again is worse than what Aberdeen were posting. And then, opposition teams kind of sussed out what Aberdeen were doing a little bit, and that kind of led it then into a spiral. So it'll be interesting to see as teams begin to adjust to what's going on at Hearts. If they're bunkering more against them, particularly at Tynecastle, are they able to break down opposition, that type of thing? So I think they're going to get stress tested. And just one more thing from that before we move on to Rangers here is their average shot quality from open play is really poor. Like it's actually 6% below what league average has been over the last decade. So that's just not a number that you would expect a team that's going to challenge for the league to have their average chance quality anywhere near that. And it's actually upside down. I mean, that opponents are 5% higher than league average over that period from their average chance quality again. So that it's just a flag. It's like, okay, how are they actually performing here? So, but yeah, he has an embarrassment of riches. So it's going to be hard for him not to get better at utilization of the squad. Particularly some of the guys get fit. The premier signing and the right back, I think he'll come back as well here. So, yeah, no time for complacency, as was kind of the summary of the.
I mean, remember,
article.
Defenses win leagues, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not saying we don't have to improve in the final third. Of course we do. But it is defenses win league, and we're nearly most of the way through, 3/4 of the way through. The way the fixtures have gone over the last few seasons, we've got the hard set of fixtures this season. We're away to virtually all the top 6 teams. That's flipped back and forward, by the way, every other season. So we've had the kind of the harder first set of fixtures, meaning that when we get into November, December, that will flip, and we'll have the better teams at home and the smaller teams away generally, as a rule. So I think I'm trying to be positive here.
I think. I kind of joked in the chat, or I forget where I did it. It's like, it's the race to 80, right? So it's like, well, how do you get to 80 points? And I think people forget some people forget because of how dominant we've been, kind of since Ange arrived in the seasons that we've won. It's been, mid 90s. People may not remember that we won the league with 82 points in 2017-18, and it was a bit of a slog. And the 18-19 season, when Rodgers left, that was a slog, and we won it with 87 points. So it would not be, crazy given where we're at, and given these underlying performance levels, that whoever wins the league is going to be closer to 80 or maybe even in the high 70s. So it's not crazy that Hearts could push towards that level. So that's why I'm saying it's not time to be complacent. We talk about things that Celtic need to do, and we hope they do, to improve, to get those performance levels up. But I just wanted to set expectations a little bit. Well, let's talk about quick here, because a lot of it we don't know, but because we don't know who the new manager is going to be as of the time of recording this. Poor Russell Martin put out of his misery. So a lot of the discussions that we had back in the spring and the early summer about the operational risks, the cultural risks, with the new owners, the San Francisco-based owners, hiring a vegan. I mean, unbelievable. You couldn't write it any funnier than that. Going horribly wrong. What are your thoughts on how that's played out, and where do you think it kind of leaves Rangers in the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate a couple of points that you made about Hearts, is that their underlying numbers were horrible in terms of average, and one of the worst actually, which probably doesn't get a lot of airtime, is their average XG per shot was horrendous. They just weren't
Brutal.
creating chances.
Yeah.
And at the other end of it, this kind of slightly subjective stat around big chances that I do myself, but also other vendors do as well. They're after all the games, 17 games or something like that. The number of big chances they'd created was like less than one a game, and the number that they had conceded was almost three a game. That's over, and they've not even played anyone massively talented in terms of, apart from Bruges, arguably. So
Right.
there's clear issues there, and it wasn't getting better. And what I think is the big question, I think, is to what extent have they recruited really badly, and that these players are just not very good, and to what extent is it solely down to Russell Martin and the way that he wanted them to play? Now the answer is going to be a bit in the grey area in the middle, and we won't know until maybe a new person comes in. But I would be astonished, I guess, a little bit, despite the bending to the feral mob and getting rid of the guy. I would be slightly astonished if they completely changed tack from this idea that to win the Scottish Premier League you need to play possession-based football, and that is the way that they're going to go. If they threw that out the window and hired a Sean Dyche, I would be delighted, because would be crazy to do that. It would absolutely be insane, and we'd be back to netball again, where you're probably going to give Celtic a hard time, and you're probably going to pull off a couple of away wins in the Europa League that you didn't expect, just by the attritional nature of how you play and playing the percentages on free, corners and free kicks and all that sort of thing. But you're going to struggle like hell against St Mirren and
And
Kilmarnock
at
and all these
Kilmarnock.
teams, and Hearts,
Yeah.
by the way,
Yep. Yep.
especially so. You try and go
Yep.
toe to toe with that kind of attrition ball, So especially given the players that they've got. So I don't know how that's going to go, but I suspect they're going to go down the road of having somebody with at least an adjacent philosophy in terms of style of play, because presumably that's what they think they've recruited in terms of this unprecedented Scottish football net spend that they had in the summer to buy all these players that were presumably meant to fit that style of play. So if they go back to Gerrard, I mean, again, that could be much hilarity there,
Uh,
really. The guy had one successful season under the most ridiculous, unique and unrepeatable circumstances that we've ever seen in football in that COVID season, and failed badly in every other job since. That would be potentially quite hilarious. Or they go for McInnes. I mean, again, McInnes with even better resources playing 4-4-2 hoofball. Okay, see my comments about Dyche. So I don't know. Listen, they're bound to improve, right? They're bound to. They cannot get worse. That's surely not possible. But I think we're going to have to think very carefully about this move, not only in terms of tactically the direction of they go in philosophically and where we see this project going, but also the fans. If they don't
yeah.
get the fans on side with this next move as well, that's not going to go well. So this is a very tricky balancing act, I think.
Yeah, I think, to me, there's one clear and obvious candidate. I have no idea if he'd want the job, but Muscat, to me, I said he was the clear and obvious one back in the spring. I had a back and forth with Johnny McFarlane on Twitter about this guy. He's 26 games into a 30-game season at whatever the name of I think it's a Shanghai club that he's managing in China. They've won 2 leagues in a row. They're top of the table by 2 points with 4 games to go. I doubt he's going to leave that job now. I mean, I'm not sure I'd want to hire him just personally, like a guy that would leave his club high and dry like that.
But we are the people. I mean,
well, right, yeah, yeah. Who? How dare he not come immediately upon?
How dare he have us? Yeah,
right, yeah. So how dare he not be a scumbag and leave his club high and dry like that? Yeah. So I that would be one that would be coherent because he would kind of check a lot of boxes. Other than they probably couldn't get him until maybe early December. Is kind of what I would guesstimate that he might theoretically be willing to go. But yeah, I agree with you. Like Marath laid out back in June when they met with the share issuance and at the meeting with shareholders and supporters from Rangers was that they're going to follow their plan. And for them, they clearly screwed up on executing this plan to date, but I don't think they're just going to mothball it. They're not just good. To your point, they're not going to go Ned ball. They're not going to say, "Oh, well, we thought that this was the best way to go," and that we're going to completely blow that up and go a completely different direction. So I think it would likely to be some kind of manager that's going to be positional and possession based. Now, I will say this: it was notable to me to watch Motherwell play on a weekend when this went down, because what you saw from Motherwell was clear patterns of play, clear movement of guys moving. And I don't know the attribution of why it didn't happen at Rangers, but that's what a guy who's supposed to be coaching a positional style of play is wanting his players to do. Their players weren't doing it under Martin. I don't know it's because he's a horrible coach or the players weren't listening. I had said shortly after the window closing, the fact that Raskin was staying was a bad sign for Martin because
he just does when your best player does what the hell he wants, then you're going to be struggling. And when the guy that you brought in to replace him because you think he was going to be sold is I don't know if he's ever played as a 6 in his life, you've got a fundamental problem in the middle of the pitch.
Right. Yeah. So they were not, for whatever reason, they were not playing a positional style of play. And it was the whole system was collapsing. Again, I don't know why that was, but they were not playing that way. So whoever they bring in, if there's any kind of buy-in from the players, they're going to be right back with the same situation. I mean, if they bring in Muscat and Raskin's going to be like, I'm off half-cocked doing what I want, and I'm supposed to be making these runs when my manager says that the ball's over here, you make that run, and I say, F you, I do what I want. That's not going to get better. That's an intractable problem. And when you're supposedly putting in the strategic way of playing and recruiting for it, I mean, you can't let the inmates run the asylum. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. So to be interesting, but we I think we can't really understand how good these players are playing that style until some of them play it. Like it's just kind of crazy how much it really did collapse. I mean, and there was only very brief flashes in a couple of games for like 20 minutes at a time where you're like, oh, they're actually playing positional football here. Other than that, it was just a complete mess. So yeah, I think it's very much still yet to be determined. But again, just from a resource perspective, even if it's a mediocre window, which I think most of the consensus is at best, it was a mediocre window from a talent perspective. They're not this bad, right? So they're going to get better, and to a degree. So we just have to monitor it and hope for Russell Martin's mental health and persisting through those fun several months and his experience in Glasgow.
I'm sure he'll enjoy his payoff at least, if he ever gets it.
Well, that's true. Fair enough too. Yeah. All right. Well, it's a long marathon episode this week. Had a lot to get to. So thank you everyone for hanging in there. Thank you, Alan. We'll be back on recording Thursday for our extra time show for our subscribers. And then Laura will be back with us next week as we trudge through another international break. What is it, like 100 of these this year or something? Got to get all these qualifiers.
Yeah.
So thanks again, and we'll be back next week.